NASA scientists are working with officials from Rio de Janeiro and New York City using satellite data to prepare for the effects of climate change. Climate resilience focuses on anticipating and preparing for issues like sea level rise and urban heat islands. Melting glaciers and the expansion of water as it warms contribute to rising sea levels. NASA scientists use climate models to predict how and where the seas will rise. In New York, city officials take these projections into account while rebuilding for major storms like Hurricane Sandy and anticipating future coastal flooding. Dark surfaces like pavement in cities absorb heat. As green spaces disappear, expanding cities lose the cooling effects of plants evaporating water. As a result, cities are often warmer than their surrounding areas. NASA scientists use thermal bands from satellites like Landsat and MODIS to understand how city layouts can affect the heat they produce.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network Trinidad and Tobago Chapter, CYEN Climate Talks, Pillars of Justice webinar. My name is Biani Marie Williams, and I will be your host this evening. I am the Public Relations Officer of CYEN, and I am also an aspiring waste management consultant. Thank you to everyone who attended day one yesterday evening. I am honored to be your host for day two. I am also joined by my colleagues who I invite to introduce themselves now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nayoka Morris. I am also on the CYEN exec right now. I am aspiring to be a lab researcher in environmental science and sustainable technologies. And I really do thank you for joining us here today.
Hi everyone, I'm Michaela Hussein, and I was your host for yesterday, but today I'm just chilling in here with the attendees, and I'm the Deputy National Coordinator for the Caribbean Youth Environment Network in Trinidad and Tobago.
Hi everyone, I'm Priya Ramjohn and I'm the Treasurer of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network in the Trinidad and Tobago chapter.
Hi, and I'm Samaya Sipol, Secretary of CYEN.
Thank you for those lovely introductions. So now you know the executive of CYEN. CYEN's work in climate justice throughout the Caribbean is made possible through the generous support of the Clara Lionel Foundation. Today, we have some more amazing speakers here to discuss our two topics, climate education and engagement, and community resilience and adaptation. In a short while, we will hear from presenters from different organizations. Today, we have with us CYEN Environmental Services Limited, the Environmental Management Authority, EMA, and the Cropper Foundation, TCF. This will be followed by a question and answer session where persons in the Zoom meeting will have the opportunity to win a prize. So those live on our YouTube channel, if you want to hop over to the Zoom, you will have the opportunity to win a prize. After that, we will have a short break followed by our panel discussion. Now, just to give some background on our topics, climate justice means finding solutions to the climate crisis that not only reduces emissions and protects the natural world, but do so in a way that creates a fairer, more just, and more equal world in the process. Today's topics, as I said, climate education and engagement. Climate education and engagement promotes climate action by helping people understand and address the impact of the climate crisis and reducing denial and misunderstanding surrounding the climate crisis. People become empowered with knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes needed to act as agents of change. Education and engagement must go beyond climate science and illustrate the interconnectivity between climate change and other social, racial, and environmental issues. Community resilience and adaptation. Climate change disproportionately affects the most marginalized, who are the least responsible for the climate crisis. And this inequitable system, due to economic development that unfortunately in many places is inequitable, this lowers the marginalized opportunity to adapt to the climate crisis. Resilience is a community's capacity to recover from the climate impact, while adaptation refers to reducing the ongoing and intensifying negative impacts of climate change within a community. Resilience and adaptation support local communities to fight the ongoing climate crisis. Now we will go right into our presentations. Our first speaker is Mrs. Shan Kapi-Young, the CEO and Principal Consultant of CYEN Environmental Services Limited. CYEN Environmental Services Limited is a for-profit social enterprise specializing in waste education, waste management training, and waste project consultancy. Founded in 2015 by their CEO and principal consultant, our speaker today, Mrs. Shan Kapi-Young, they are laser focused on their goal to transform the local waste landscape by delivering effective waste education, training, and tools to countless customers and organizations across the Caribbean. So Ms. Kapi-Young, you can go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Vianney Marie, and good evening to everyone. Thanks again for the opportunity to be able to speak to you. And I see some of my colleagues say, hi, Omar, who are on the call as well, and looking forward to hearing what they have to say. So I am going to jump into the presentation. Right, so I am hoping that everyone can see it. Just give me, Vianney, can you see it?
Yes, I am seeing it.
Great. All right, wonderful. So I am just going to be talking to you in very simple terms about the link between waste management and climate justice and education, and how they all wrap each other, together. From my experience, and of course, some of my global counterparts will agree that waste management has not necessarily been at the forefront of climate change discussions. When we think climate change discussions, we think about emissions, we think coming from specific sectors, transportation, industry, the agricultural sector, but there's very little to no mention about how waste management plays a role. And the wonderful thing is that at COP26, they talked about methane gas emissions and the need to reduce it. And the fact is that with organic waste management specifically, because our last study indicated, which needs to be revised. So I kind of tired of saying the same things over and over, but for your benefit, I'll repeat it again, which is that the majority of the waste that we produce in Trinidad and Tobago is organic. What happens, that waste just goes to our landfills, decomposes, and releases methane gas. So if we come up with solutions to effectively deal with our organic waste, because sometimes the attention tends to not be focused on organics, it tends to be focused on plastics, because yes, they're long lasting, they exist for long periods of time, they can really affect our water courses and water sources. But when we're looking at our local context, or even by extension, our Caribbean context, plastics is not our number one problem. Organic material is. So therefore, it requires us to shift our thinking and our focus as it pertains to how we are going to deal with this. So Vianney Marie already said a little bit about what CYEN Environmental is. So we are a social enterprise. You're probably wondering, what is a social enterprise? So our business is really about not only the profit side of business, but also doing a social or environmental good. In our case, it is increasing the waste literacy rates, for lack of a better word, in Trinidad and Tobago. That's essentially what we do at our core. And social entrepreneurship exists in both for-profit and non-profit registration status. But however, we are a for-profit entity. And you may also be saying to yourself, well, I never really heard of that. Well, if you said that to yourself, that's probably the truth, because social entrepreneurship is not a recognized legal entity in Trinidad and Tobago. So you're probably wondering, well, Michelle, how are you functioning? And it's not a registered legal entity. Well, I do like going against the norm. I'm considered to be a disruptor. My friends tell me I should just get used to it. So I recognize that social entrepreneurship is not new. It is a very huge deal. And when you look globally, and you would see there are very, very huge companies that are social enterprise. In different parts of the world, they're registered as different things. So you have B Corps, purpose-driven businesses. You have many different names, social enterprises, right? But the core of what we do is doing something towards either social good or environmental good. It's just rethinking our business models to not focus on profit generation only. And she also mentioned these three, I call them our buckets, these three buckets. So we have waste education and literacy program, of which our children's book sits. And yesterday we had a very first virtual puppet show for children ages 5 to 10. It was absolutely amazing. I think even better time than the children did. And where we learned about the theme again was for World Environment Day and the Only One Earth. We talked about what they can do at their ages to protect the planet. I read a little bit from the book as well. We had wonderful puppets who share their own perspectives because, you know, they love the planet just as much as I do. So that is where our waste education and literacy programs sit. So we try to use a lot of culturally relevant, innovative, creative methods of really getting the message across. Because in my opinion, we've been doing the same thing over and over, which makes us a truly insane bunch of people. The second bucket is our waste management training. So this sits in the form of webinars like these, workshops, and online courses. So we have a short course in waste management with the University of the West Indies. We're actually going to be launching another course soon in green entrepreneurship. We teach composting at home, and really I've been trying to build out our course offerings specifically around waste management as well. And then the last bucket is where waste project consultancy sits. So if someone has a waste management project, something related to landfill, something related to stakeholder engagement, something related to food waste, which is something that I am extremely interested in. That's the bucket that will fit under. So that's essentially a bit about the work that we do. So the big thing here, and this is the reason why we are in this discussion today, is to talk about the relationship between waste management and climate justice. And I remember being in a session where we said, oh, actually, no, it was a video that I was looking at because I was also asked to talk about the youth voice as it pertains to climate justice with the Anglican Diocese. And in the video, the person talked about you cannot talk about climate justice without talking about racial justice. You would find, especially as it pertains to waste management, when we think about where landfills are placed, where we think about where incinerators are placed, when we think about where a lot of the open dump sites are, you would realize that they're in low-income communities. They're in communities where there's a greater percentage of people of color, and we live in the cosmopolitan society of Trinidad and Tobago. We are a population of people of color, right? Majority. So you would find that these are some of the places where our landfills are placed, and it really are hazardous waste facilities. But also, not just from the placement of those things in terms of where they're located, because we had multiple dump sites all over Trinidad and Tobago. The only three that remain are the one in the Beetham, Wanapo, and Forest Park in terms of the ones that SWIM call manages. It is also, I always say nothing is coincidental, but it also shows that those landfills are placed in certain areas where there's criminal activity, it's a low income community. And the decision to do that may not have been one where, oh yes, we're going to purposely put it there, because as I said, there were a number of dump sites. All of them were open dump sites, majority of which were closed. However, these 3 remained open, and that's how SWIMCALL started. SWIMCALL was created to manage the landfill sites by the then Prime Minister, late Dr. the Honorable Eric Williams. So, but you would also find that from those communities, in our case, and I'm keeping it local, where those people also unfortunately play a negative role as it pertains to waste, even though they tend to be the most affected. So you would think that they would take the alternative approach, but what we have seen is that they have chosen to not do so, which is unfortunate. But it also means now if we go to Global North, you would find that you've heard about Fleet, Michigan, where there was a huge, this is water related, of course, where there was a huge crisis as it pertains to water quality in Flint, Michigan in the US. And that was a community with people of color. That was a low income community as well. So, and there is a lot of intersection between waste management and climate justice, hence the reason why my colleagues in the space want to place it higher on the global agenda for us to pay more attention to its effects, how it affects climate, and how you and us as a general population could do our part. I remember the environmental commissioner, forgot his name now, said he was amazed that there were not more climate justice cases coming before him, right? So it made me think, are we accepting what it is because we feel that nothing can be done? Or is it that we just don't want to go through the hassle of taking this institution, that institution to court and whatnot, because legal fees are expensive? It just made me ask more questions. I didn't necessarily have all the answers, but it just made me ask some more questions. And I want you to think about what are some of those questions that come up as well. So just moving right along, because I like keeping my presentation short and to the point. What would I say to you? To you, I would say to let your voice be heard. I've been told by a number of young people, Ms. Shan, we don't want to just feel like we're tokens. We don't just want to feel like, oh, we remember, well, we need to talk to the young people. So let's just add them in, after the fact, after the fact kind of scenario, where you want to be a part of the discussion. A lot of the activities that are being led across the world are being led by young people, because you guys are going to inherit what my generation and the generations before me have left behind. So it is important that you recognize that you have a role to play, that your voice is powerful, and it is the only voice that is important is your own. And the other thing that I want to say is to commit to action, no matter how small. I remember seeing one of my colleagues share this Instagram post saying, we do not need millions of people to do zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people to take imperfect actions. We do not need millions of people to do zero waste perfectly, but we need millions of people to take imperfect action, right? So cumulatively, all our actions will add up over the course of time. So no matter how small, I told my little people, the children, I called them my little people yesterday, I said, you can take action no matter how small. And they promised me they're committed to taking action, even at 5 years old, at 4 years old, at 9 years old, right? So Saraya, what is your thing that you are going to commit to no matter how small? What is your action, Angel, that you are going to commit to no matter how small? Amira and Bella, what are some of the things that after this presentation today, after you've heard from all of us, what are you going to decide to do consciously every day moving forward, and to give yourself some grace on those days that you don't remember? I am Jenny, I'm forgetful Jenny sometimes, so I give myself some grace. Even I give myself some grace on the days where I don't get things right, I forget, I made an error, because it's about imperfect action. It's not about doing things perfectly. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me today. And feel free to connect with me on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram at SIELTT. I am also on LinkedIn as myself, Shan Kafi Young, and SIEL Environmental is also on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with us, to follow our journey. It is about growing a community of people who want to save nature by utilizing waste in a resourceful manner. So thank you so much. And I would leave the floor open for questions or turn it over to my other presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Shan, for that lovely presentation. And truly, your organization is very well aligned with the topics of today, that being climate education and engagement, and also community resilience and adaptation. So thank you very much. We will have a Q&A session after all the presentations, all the presenters have presented. And to our audience, I hope you're paying attention because we do have our questions for prizes for our Q&A session. So pay attention to every presenter, please. Okay, so our next speaker we have for today, representing the Copper Foundation, is Mr. Omar Mohammed. Omar is the Chief Executive Officer of the Copper Foundation, a nonprofit organization working to advance the trajectory of sustainability in the Caribbean for over 20 years. He brings significant experience in the field of development and sustainability education and management, having served as the Copper Foundation's Program Officer in Education for Sustainable Development, as well as the National Coordinator of the UNESCO Schools Network, leading national and regional efforts at sustainability and diversity in education. At the Copper Foundation, he has led their entry into data science and technology for sustainability, natural capital, accounting and economics, and civil society governance and strengthening. He has also worked as a consultant with the University of the West Indies, various United Nations agencies, and other civil society organizations. He is also currently a director of the NGO CAISO Sex and Gender Justice and has previously served in other roles, such as member of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature's Commission on Education and Communication. Omar has a Master of Science in Sustainability Leadership from the University of Cambridge, Master in Business Administration Innovation from the University of the West Indies, and a BSc in Environmental and Natural Resource Management from the University of the West Indies. So we are very pleased that Omar is joining us today, and take it away.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Really glad to be here. Following Shan is always difficult because, as you could tell, she's super dynamic. I'm glad to see one of the little people jumping in there for a second.
Omar, don't say that to go. Say hi. Let's see in here. Okay.
So my job here today is to just talk really quickly about the work that we do at the Copper Foundation and how we relate our work as a nonprofit organization to climate justice. So you see here, this is our unofficial quote, motto: life is about more than personal advantage. And that kind of exemplifies how we view this entire lens of climate justice. And you'll see that moving forward. So who we are, we're a nonprofit organization, like Vianney Marie said. We've been around since 2000, and we work primarily within the Caribbean. And this is our very long mission. But basically, our goal really is to bend this trajectory of development towards an end goal that's more sustainable and also, very importantly, socio-economically equitable. So, we'll talk more about that, I suppose, in the panel discussion. But, it's very important, like Shan said, to, it is important, of course, to be environmentally sustainable and pro-environmental and, all that good stuff. But, if you do that but ignore the socioeconomic parts of development, you're doing everyone a disservice. And that type of development might seem nice in the short term, but it's never going to be sustainable. So our mission really through our work is to influence basically the processes of development to be more sustainable. And we do that in a number of ways. So this is really how, when we got the invitation to present on this, I mean, yes, we've been working on on issues related to environmental justice and participation and all that good stuff. But I didn't actually really sit down to think about what exactly is our philosophy on climate justice. And the thing about Cropper Foundation, we like to think of ourselves as a bunch of nerds who like to talk about things, you know, what's the philosophy behind what we're doing, or you know, what are some of the big picture things that guide us? Because, you know, if you don't have a lot of those things, you tend to, again, as you all will figure out, you know, you tend to suffer more for the work that you're doing, unless you have some kind of guiding principle or philosophy behind the work that you really want to do. I mean, you know, Sean could probably jump in later on to really talk about, you know, having this personal philosophy behind the work that you do. So we think a lot about the philosophy behind our choices at the foundation for getting involved in things. So basically, our philosophy on climate justice really, in my head, revolves around three main things. That the climate change conversation is not scientific. The debate is not scientific. I think we all know that. The consensus is pretty clear about climate change being a biophysical thing that's caused by human actions. But the conversation and debate is now more social than anything else. You know, it's become a football kick between people who listen to the science and then people who are willing to use issues like climate change as political or social footballs. So the conversation really, again, is not scientific anymore, it's social. And what we know is that society treats different people differently. And Sean mentioned that earlier, you know, they don't look like us, so we could build a dump there, or they don't act like us, so who cares if we take away funding from some particular social program? So if the climate change conversation is social and society treats people differently, it kind of stands to reason that for things around climate change, you need to attack climate change using different approaches to meet the needs of different people. So basically, you know, we all know climate change is a very big, complex, vague issue that people might say, oh, well, that's hurricanes and thing, right? Or that's droughts, or well, the place not really getting hotter, getting colder, like around Christmas. So, you know, it's this very vague thing that people get confused by, and rightly so. But, you know, that makes it difficult to deal with and difficult to communicate and difficult to see a lot of the connections that really define what climate justice is. I mean, you all will hear about, if you haven't heard about it already, terms like intersectionality, which is really, you know, these issues about racial justice and social justice and gender justice and all these things, and how they intersect with things like climate justice. So, you know, for example, you know, putting money into a climate change adaptation project might sound good on paper, but if that adaptation project is, let's say, clearing away low-income housing because it poses a flood risk, is that really socially equitable? You know, it might solve the problem for the sort of well-to-dos living lower down, but you're actually creating different problems right close to home. So climate justice for us is really understanding who is being affected and how they're being affected, and figuring out how we can try to address those issues in the work that we do across different levels. So I'm going to just talk quickly about three ways in which we've kind of incorporated climate justice into our work. And it mightn't necessarily seem very obvious, but trust me on this, for now, it's our way of including it. So we have three main ways that we do it sort of currently and over the last couple of years, we've tried to put a lot of support into civil society. And for those of you all who don't know, civil society is really the sector that's not the state or private sector. Social enterprises to some extent can fall into civil society because they're mission driven to a large extent. So in many cases, while profitability is important, they are looking out for other types of stakeholders as well. But basically, it will be persons like NGOs, sometimes academia, and so on. Really, groups that represent people and citizens of whatever country you might be in. So we've tried to really enhance the voice of civil society in a range of different ways that relate to environmental work. So we have built the capacity of dozens of environmental and community groups in understanding environmental accountability and what that means in Trinidad and Tobago. We've sat with them at the EMA to teach them how to go through EIAs so they can make more informed contributions when something happens in their community. We've launched different spaces for civil society consultation. And what that means is basically when you have laws and legislation and developments are being made, they're generally supposed to have consultation. But in many cases, this doesn't really reach as many people as it should reach. So what we've done is really create spaces for that consultation to happen. And also trying to be, because we have such a long, credible history, trying to be this voice to advocate for greater civil society inclusion. So this is just, some excerpts from a big project that we ended, where we worked with over 30 communities to build connections between communities, to take them to the EMA, to show them how to go and access an EIA. We train them on things like the Environmental Management Act, the kind of questions to ask, as well as having them learn from one another. The second way we do it is try our best to center the voices of people who are marginalized. Because again, we have privilege, because, we've been able to go to university. People like myself have been able to go to really good universities, Sean as well, being able to have great fellowships, and we have that privilege in our institutions as well. So it's our responsibility to use that privilege to open out a space to get people who mightn't have access to that space a voice. So we've done that throughout all of our projects. We make sure to include community voices and community participation from the design to implementation. If we have to pay for catering, you pay for somebody from the community. If you have to rent a tent, you try to get somebody from the community. If you're having an event, make sure somebody from whatever community is represented in a meaningful way. But we've also created something called the Caribou Environmental News Network, which came out of that large project, which is the first citizen journalism environmental news network in the Caribbean and slowly becoming more climate focused. And you can go to caribois.org. And basically, this is an ongoing program that trains regular persons from communities, especially rural communities, citizen journalism, so that they can report on their own stories and have those stories be accessible to anyone with an internet connection. And since launching, we've had over 100,000 unique visitors reading stories from communities right here in Trinidad and Tobago about everything from flooding in Valencia to the appearance of a capuchin monkey in Lopino to breaking news on the Nabarima oil spill. So you can check that out. And this is just one of the home pages that you can go on and hopefully check out after today. And then finally, we work a lot in policy. So we are on the steering committee of the Trinidad and Tobago Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, where we really try to champion climate justice in the way that they do their reporting nationally on the energy sector, and again, leveraging our institutional power to make sure that civil society is involved, regular folks are involved in the discussions around the energy sector, and making sure that we move in a direction that's more environmentally conscious. So this is just another excerpt. This is on the left-hand side, environmental reporting toolkit that we're going to be piloting for the first time on a national level with all of the energy companies to report publicly on environmental issues. And on the right, you see some advocacy work that we put into on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago to push for environmental transparency in this global standard, which was actually passed. So there is sort of mandatory environmental disclosures in this sort of global energy standard. So that's it. We're always available to chat. Check us out, cropperfoundation.org. I didn't put the social media there, but we're on all platforms: Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. We're right there on Cropper Foundation, and check us out on caribwa.org.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for that informative presentation. And finally, our last presenter, we have Ms. Jillian Stanislas from the Environmental Management Authority, the EMA. She's an Environmental Program Officer at the EMA. The EMA is committed to protecting and conserving the natural environment to enhance quality of life. To commemorate World Environment Day last Sunday, the EMA recently conducted a seedling planting exercise at secondary schools that are participating in their EMA Enviro Club program. These schools include Princestown East Secondary School and Cowan Hamilton Secondary School. The seedlings distributed included pink pui seedlings and pumarak tree seedlings. So the EMA is very active in many spheres, including active in our schools. So please take it away, Ms. Jillian.
Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies for the slight mix-up we had in our system. Let me just share my screen. Has everyone seen my screen? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay then. No, because I'm not sure about the time constraints, so I'm going to go straight into the meat of the matter, which is the climate justice aspect of the presentation. So I'm going to skip most of the introduction because I like to talk plenty and I need time to talk. So I'll just do the concept of climate justice in our mind. As I like to put this part in the formulation of what we now know as UNFCCC was as a result of a nexus of climate change and sustainable development. And that is where the whole idea of climate justice started. And it has been growing and continuing from there, which I think is very important in terms of what we are discussing today, so that it gives us a context of where we can jump off and go forward.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Jillian, just before you get into it, you can actually go from the beginning because we have your time slot. So if you would like to start from the beginning so everyone can get your full presentation, that is totally fine.
Well, I will stay here because I don't want to go to the start. Everybody in this room, I hope, knows about climate change.
Okay.
And that sort of thing. So I will stay with the climate justice. I could go into detail from here. That's why I wanted to stay here.
Sure.
So climate justice is recognizing and addressing climate change in the different social, economic, public health, and the adverse impacts on these various sectors. So I had it into categories of low-income families, indigenous peoples, people of color, people with disabilities, older and young people, and women. I wanted to, even in my sphere, being so long in the environmental field, over 20 years, I still learn every day. And recently I was on a Caribbean-wide program, and the introduction of the fifth sector that I highlighted here, the older and young people, they highlighted a change as the difference between, even when we think of climate justice, how we view communities. So yes, we will say old and young people, but even in defining the older community or the young persons, even within those categories are subcategories. For example, persons who live in rural areas as opposed to persons who live in the urban cities. They have their own concept and their own challenges as it relates to climate justice and climate change. So these things we have to factor in. And as we go forward, we will learn and modify how we treat with these issues, because we may sit and think that we understand the various issues. But at the end of the day, it's only when we go and meet with the communities we understand their cares and their concerns. So based on that, now the EMA has been appointed the focal point for the Action for Climate Empowerment. And what that means, what that denotes, let me just give you a background of what ACE is. It denotes the work under Article 6 of the UNFCCC and Article 12 of the Paris Agreement at COP21 in 2015. At COP26, they developed the work plan for ACE, and this work plan highlights 4 priority areas, which I'll show you. So we have these 6 scope areas. It was in education, training, public awareness, public access to information, public participation, and international cooperation. So out of those 6 pillars, we have objectives of change in habits in the long term, developing practical skills for persons in the communities, reaching persons of all ages and walks of life, making the information freely available and accessible to all persons in the community, involve all stakeholders in decision-making and implementation, and strengthening cooperation and joint efforts within that. Out of that, they had 4 priority areas. The first priority area, policy coherence. Second, coordinated action. Third area, tools and support. And finally, monitoring and evaluation. Right now, the EMA is focusing on priority area 2, which is coordinated action. Now, based on that, because we only started this year, in terms of the rolling out of this ACE program that will incorporate, as we are talking about today, climate justice. Our role is centered around identifying the gaps we have in alignment with the pillars and the priority areas, monitoring and reporting on all activities in Trinidad and Tobago as it related to the various areas we identified before. And we have to ensure that the pillars are being implemented across our society's various stakeholder groups. So that once we identify the gaps, for example, we may have excellent work being done by an NGO or even a government entity, but other communities that could benefit from that information may not be aware of it. So based on the work that we are now starting to do, we want to have a better coordination and be able to disseminate that information so that all who can benefit and should benefit are aware and have access to the information or the resources that they need to help assist in the fight against climate change. Right. So based on that, the EMA has started, we have started a series of consultations. We do not assume we know anything. So we have started a series of consultations where we are targeting various stakeholders. So we started with government, we're doing educational institutions this week. We have CBOs and NGOs, we have agencies in Tobago as well as Trinidad. So we are having a series of consultations where we are going out and trying to find out what all these entities are doing as it relates to climate change. And once we have that information, that is where we'll be compiling and putting together a way forward in terms of how do we treat with our climate adaptation issues, or climate resilience issues, and how we can incorporate members of the community. I came in late, as I said before, so I was hearing some of the information that proper foundation that had going on. As a result of that, other persons might not be aware. They will be doing excellent work, but how do they disseminate that information? Yes, we have websites. Yes, we have social media sites, but other persons may still not be aware. So we have to devise strategies of how to meet, as I said before, the issues of the urban youth or the urban elderly may be different to the issues of the rural community, the rural youth, the rural elderly person. So it is not a one size fits all. So, okay, we have a brilliant strategy, okay, and because we are in that community, so we know what to do for them. And we do it there, and that works. But then we take that same strategy and we carry it to another community, and it fails miserably because it does not speak to the fundamental issues that these people on a day-to-day basis identify with. So that is what the ACE program is about. We are there to coordinate and collect information and disseminate it. But how we go about doing that is dependent on the results we get from the consultations we currently have. So as I said, we have just started to try to identify the gaps and how we can treat with the gaps, because as we all know in this room, because we are interested in the environment and the climate, that's why we are here. It is accelerating. We are seeing the consequences and all the issues as it relates to climate change, and how we address that is very important to us. But we really need the assistance of the wider community in terms of getting them to identify. I gave this example when we just started the first consultation on the ACE. We had a breakout session with the different government agencies. And when we were trying to get them to identify if they were doing anything on the climate change, yes, we have a number of persons who could give me the theory and all the information about climate change. But when it comes to the work that they are doing, there was a disconnect. And when we had to talk it through, and it's only in talking through that they understood that half of what they're doing every year, all the time, has to do with climate mitigation and climate resilience building. But they did not understand what they were doing, and these were government agencies, what they were doing on a day-to-day basis as it related to climate change. Because they just thought NGOs and CBOs did that work, and the EMA did that work. They did nothing as it related to climate change. All they were thinking they're doing their work plan as instructed by the officers for what they had to do. But so much of the work that a number of these agencies and some of our NGOs and CBOs doing has to do with climate resilience and climate adaptation. But there's a disconnect. And even that, identifying that disconnect and how to bridge that gap is part of the work that we are trying to do right now. So based on all of that, I didn't want to do a long presentation because I wanted us to have the conversation in terms of how, because this, to me, this is also a learning avenue for us in terms of how we go about executing and gathering the information and identifying the gaps that we can fill in our coordinating role at the EMA. So based on that, I want to thank you for the short time that I had, and I hope you all understand. And I just wanted to add as well, even though we're saying at the EMA over the years, we have not had targeted work to the various community, we have done community work, but in terms of targeting special interest groups, our focus mainly over the years have been the schools and the children. We will do the videos, we will do the presentations at the school. If we are called by a community, we will go out and do that work. But in terms of identifying, for example, going to a senior home and having a targeted program that will help them understand, grasp what climate change and climate adaptation and mitigation and all the words and all the things that it relates to, how it impacts on their personal lives. We have not done that as yet. And we have a golden opportunity with this program, the ACE program, to try to bridge that gap. Because that is, to me, and to us at the EMA, has been the greatest task that we have had of bridging the gap between, as someone asked the question to us, bridging the gap between what I know mentally and scientifically about climate change and how it impacts me, the individual, the person who lives in a community, a rural or urban community, the person who has a disability and has to face the same flood in Port of Spain because rain fell for 3 hours too long. How do I treat with that on a personal level and how to address that going forward? So this to me and this program as well will help us in terms of going forward as it relates to climate justice. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jillian, for that very important presentation, especially at the end. Although, as you said, the EMA is doing a lot of work, there are still areas that need improvement, still areas that need to be targeted. And that makes me even more excited for our panel discussion that we'll be getting into soon. So hopefully we can talk more about that with our other organizations present here today. So, you know, a little more exciting part, although everything's exciting, but I know especially for our students present, they're really eager to win a prize. We have our question and answer segment, and we will start it off with the questions for the audience, those present with us here in the Zoom meeting. So those on YouTube, as I said before, if you'd like a chance to win a prize, you have to hop over here in the Zoom meeting. So I would start with a question from our first organization, CYEN Environmental Services Limited. That question is, what is one of the major impacts waste has on climate justice? So our attendees, you can message in the chat. Whoever gets it is whoever wins it. Let me repeat the question one more time. What is one of the major impacts waste has on climate justice? I see we have an answer in the chat. So Shan, you can let us know if this is what you're looking for. I see Soraya Ali said methane production.
I'm waiting to see if I see other answers.
Okay, we're waiting for other answers. So Soraya, if you want to try another answer, we'll see. Other attendees, let us know. Okay, we see Angel has sent in an answer. Waste contributes directly to greenhouse gas emissions through the generation of methane. Okay, so I think she expanded a little bit on Soraya's answer, but what are we thinking? I mean, the expansion was important. So you let us know, Shan, unless we want to.
The expansion gives perspective.
Exactly.
But I would still say that they are, because I'm nice and I like to, I want you to work harder, but
okay, we can give them another minute, you know.
I'll give them 1 more minute to see.
Okay, 1 more minute.
We'll say my number 1 answer. Methane is on my list too, but it's not my number 1. So I'm giving them a little bit to see if somebody will say the number 1 answer. It's like we're doing Family Feud over here. Number 1 answer is what we're looking for, right?
Sure. So let's try another answer. If we want to think back to Shan's presentation, she gave multiple ways that waste impacts on climate justice. Think back. We need to see who was really paying attention. We have an answer from Amira Ali. She says, landfills in low-income areas are one way that waste impacts climate justice. Shan, you're clapping. Is that the answer you were looking for? Yes, okay, we have a winner, Amira Ali. So we'll be in contact with you to organize getting you your prize. Congratulations. Thank you, Shan. So next we have a question from the Copper Foundation. So now we're really gonna see who is listening. This is a very specific question. How many unique visitors has Cariboa News had in just over a year? Very specific answer we're looking for. I'll repeat it one more time. How many unique visitors has Cariboa News had in just over a year? Ooh, Soraya Ali. No. Omar says no. Is she close? I don't know. She's off. She's off a little bit. Soraya, can't give away too much, but come on, someone else want to try? No, Bella is very off. Soraya was closer. We might have to go with the closest person. Who knows? Let's see if anyone could hit the nail on the head.
Let's be a bit more ambitious. Okay, congrats.
Yeah, we have a winner. Soraya came back again with a vengeance. Congratulations, Soraya. So Soraya Ali will be in contact with you. And finally, from our last presenter, Ms. Jillian, if you would like to go ahead and ask a question based on what you presented for our attendees to have the opportunity to win a prize, you can go ahead and ask a question.
What is the major program that we are involved in? I want the full name, not the acronym, that will help us to make climate justice more important in Trinidad and Tobago. That is easy.
You just want the acronym or you want the full?
The full name.
Full name, okay, not just the acronym.
Because I know the acronym, Jillian.
Sean, you are not an attendee. This is for the, okay, someone, Amira Ali, Ms. Jillian, let us know.
Yes, it is Action for Climate Empowerment.
Oh, okay, Amira Ali.
Amira,
okay,
yeah, because Amira won my own. Because Amira won my own.
Yes, Amira would like to give someone else a chance. You are correct, but the other attendees did not see the answer because she sent it to us directly. So other attendees, Amira is giving you a chance.
Yes, so in fact, because I think I gave it away as well.
She did. Especially near the end of the presentation, Ms. Jillian was talking about it a lot. This program. Okay, we have a Georgia Lee Gill. Ms. Jillian, let us know.
No, that's not it. Okay. Himati, she got it.
Okay.
So
Himati got it. Okay, great. Congratulations. So we will be in contact with you. Thank you, Amira Ali, for being so kind and giving others a chance. We really do appreciate that sort of engagement. So we will be in contact with all our winners. Now we also have some questions in the Q&A chat box. This wasn't addressed to any particular presenter, so I guess it's a general question if anybody would like to answer it. How do you approach a society that is disillusioned by climate change? And it's a two-part question. Let me give the second part one time. How do you get through to people who are tired and have given up hope?
Omar, take that one now, and I'll add in my dollars worth.
I will add mine after as well.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, I mean, I personally don't think, again, it's all depending on where you're coming from. I personally don't think people are disillusioned by climate change. I think some people, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, don't know enough about climate change. It's really, again, the echo chambers. I mean, people like us who probably are involved a lot more probably feel that disillusion, but I think there is still a lot of again, like the EMA's own, was it 2017 Environmental Literacy Survey, 2018, 2017. People, I think a couple of them, they were asking different categories, the top 10 threats, environmental threats, and in some cases they had, the sort of big symptoms, the flooding and all the sorts of things higher up, and then climate change as a topic at like 9 or 10. So I think people are still not making the connection. So I don't think people are actually disillusioned. I think people like us might be disillusioned, and there is this, climate anxiety, that type of depression. So I might say you always find, and it's kind of related to the second one. How do you get to people who are fed up, tired and fed up? A lot of that I think is internal. We feel that way, so sometimes we maybe project that on other people. There's a lot of self-care that has to happen, especially for folks who want to be involved in this type of work. So I might say take care of yourself first. That's really important. And, everywhere you go, especially if you work with communities and work with, people who are not in this field, just enjoying those conversations and realizing that you still have a lot to really educate people about. And, each conversation is really unique, and you can probably try and draw energy from that. Listening to a farmer talk about, give you his whole backstory about his father used to plant in this type of way, and he tell them Yui people when they came back in the 80s, that this is how things will be, and they never listen. And and it's just just learning from other people and hearing their experiences. So I wouldn't say people are disillusioned. I think there's a lot of work to do still, and that could be hard to think about. But again, the important thing is about things like CYE, and it is a community, and you need your community of people around you. So for example, Shannon and I, we probably don't talk often, but if we see each other somewhere, we will talk and probably moan and groan about some situation and commiserate. But again, you're meeting people to share some of those issues with, and hopefully fight off some of that disillusionment moving forward. So a roundabout answer, but.
Thank you very much, Omar. And Sean, I know you wanted to contribute to this too. And then we have Jillian, Miss Jillian.
Yeah, and I'm really happy. I'll start with Omar's second comment first. I'm really happy that he talked about self-care for people like ourselves, because doing this kind of work can get tiresome, can get weary. You feel like the pressure is on your shoulders. I know I have certainly felt that way. And recognizing the need to take a step back sometimes, to do some self-care, a cup of tea. That's my one of my self-care things. Sit quietly, minus the babies, with a cup of tea. So that is really important. And he raised a very good point, and I just wanted to add to it, where he talked about the lack of connection. There is a huge disconnect between what people think climate change is, how it affects them, and what it actually is. So Jillian talked about that a bit when she was talking about working with the different kinds of people, who the elderly, the women, the youth, in terms of how they are affected. And I'll let her speak a little bit more about that if that's what she was planning on doing. But there is a disconnect, and for me, I always try to use real examples. As Omar said, you get sometimes when you go and you talk, you get the long story about, how it used to be, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But environmental communication is a two-way street. And if there is any evidence to prove contrary to what the person is telling you, then it is your privilege, your honor to be able to share that with them, to get them to understand that this is some of the things that we need to do. So for me, from an education perspective, it really means, throwing out some of the old, rethinking, reimagining some of the concepts that we have been doing, the things we have been using, to really bring it home. Because a lot of people are like, when you say that, what do you mean? The thing that does, and then you're like, no, it's not that. So people have their own ideas of what they think it is. Even in waste management, people have hearing terms all over the place. And then I'm like, no. That's not actually what recycling is. No. That's not what biodegradability means. So you have to really do a lot of education with people. But as he said, and I agree, because I was going to tell him people disillusioned, but I really feel that the people who are disillusioned is us. The people who are doing this work every day. I mean, I watched Greta Thunberg's interview with Trevor Noah, and he asked her, do you ever get tired of saying the same things over and over again? And she's like, yeah, I kind of feel like I don't want to say it anymore, but so it is people like us who get tired, who like, oh my God, not again. You see, they're not listening. But the general population as a whole still are really disconnected from what the issue is. So that's where we have to place some of the emphasis on the group.
Okay. I want to cement the both comments with the story. I always give it. We had the International Coastal Cleanup every year, and we target children, and we had a different age group. Now, if everybody has ever participated in an ICC cleanup, you're collecting paper, garbage, everything. And you're labeling it, and you're doing it, and you're explaining why. At the end of it, we gave refreshments. And one year, I always remember this year, as soon as some of the children finished eating, they just took the paper and dropped it on the ground. And my whole demeanor at that point just fell. Because I'm like, what was the purpose of the ICC? You just pick up paper from the beach that you didn't even know about, and you just take yours that you just finished eating right on the ground. So that to me seals the whole idea of what Omar and CYEN was saying, that you as the educator, the proponent, when you try to do something and then you get that sort of reaction, it drops your spirit. But then you have other occasions that you have to draw from that brings you back up. The moment when you do a presentation, especially with the young, I've dealt more with the young person. When they understand a concept and when they run with it, it really transforms your thinking and gives you renewed energy to go forward. Or when you go out in the community and you meet again a fisherman and they're telling you their story, and then you have an understanding of what they're talking about, and you can relate their story to what you are trying to show them, and it changes their mindset. So as I said, it's all about where you tap your energy from as the educator. The disillusionment is not in the community, as most of my presentation was about. It's about us, the people who are trying to disseminate information, how we sell that information. And I think because in the past, we had a one-size-fits-all. We had, okay, we're doing an education program, so we go in all these schools. So you go in an urban school, you have success because they understand some of the issues we're talking about. But you go in a rural community, and the children, they have a different idea of what climate change is to them, and there's a disconnect. So we have to now retool ourselves, how we go about disseminating the information. And once we have that, there will be less disillusionment on the part of those of us who are the advocates. In terms of the public, as everyone has said, they really don't understand climate change, global impacts, and how it impacts on me, the community. So how we do that nexus will be the issue. So I'm just in agreement with the other two speakers, and I hope that helped in some way.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those very insightful answers. So at this time, we will now take a 10-minute break. And after that, we will jump right into our panel discussion. So we do have some entertainment. We'll be playing some videos, take a break, take a stretch before we come back and get into the discussion. So we'll be back at 7:18.
dad used to take us to this beach in Chagaramas every July, August vacation. And we're actually right almost at the beginning of the vacation. And when I was 10, we played this game with my dad where we would swim through daddy's legs and come out on the other side. So I'm swimming with my eyes closed, and then when I swam through his legs and something hit me in my head and I jumped out of the water and I was like, what is that? When I opened my eyes, it was a loaded camper floating in this very same water. And that experience changed my life. That was the beginning of a journey that I didn't even know where I would end up. That it led to where I am today, which is CYEN environment. So I have a personal connection with what I do. It's not just I studied it in school and this is what I'm doing, but waste and nature have had direct impacts on my life. I have had direct experiences with waste and with nature that I still remember today. When I was 16, almost 17 years old, my parents went through a divorce, and as a child of a divorce, it's not something you will ever want to see happen, but I remember feeling tossed aside, feeling discarded, and that's why my pet peeve is littering, because I directly associate that feeling with the action of tossing something aside. Because of that personal experience as being a child of divorced parents, as I know many children out there are. So this is also to say that you could take that feeling and transform it. Transform it into something wonderful. Transform it into changing what that meant for you when growing up. And that's what I decided to do.
The world wastes 1 billion tons of food each year, mostly at home. Shaming people to do the right thing on climate change doesn't always work. That's because few people have access to affordable, clean alternatives. Electric cars are on sale, but they remain too expensive for most people. Renewable electricity has become cheaper than fossil fuels, but not everyone has utilities that offer 100% renewable tariffs. And for those who can afford to fly, there are often no accessible zero-carbon alternatives. But people of all backgrounds can rely on one activity to make a big difference in cutting emissions. And you can do it without leaving your home. Don't waste food. In 2019, the world wasted 1 billion tons of food, more than half of all that in homes. That food often ends up in landfill, where it rots and produces greenhouse gases like methane. About 10% of global emissions can be attributed to food loss and waste. In fact, if food waste were a country, its greenhouse gas impact would be the third largest after China and the US. Cutting food waste is ranked higher as a climate solution than moving to electric cars or even switching to plant-based diets. Food waste has become a more urgent issue, especially because of the pandemic. The economic recession has pushed many people into poverty, and it is estimated that as many as 700 million people are going hungry. That's nearly 1 in 10 people alive today. Individuals often don't have a lot of agency over the types of climate solutions the world needs. Not wasting food, however, is one solution that we all can do something about. Better still, any food you don't waste is money you save. It is a rare climate solution that puts pennies in your pocket. This is Net Zero. I'm Akshat Rati. Follow us on QuickTake and Bloomberg.
We need climate justice, we need equity and fairness, we need system change and solutions for a better tomorrow, protecting the most vulnerable. We need climate justice today, climate justice now.
Okay, hi, good evening, everyone. We're back after that break. Thank you for joining us again. We will now go into the second segment of this evening, which is our panel discussion. So I invite all our panelists to please put on your camera. This is we really want a discussion format, although there are some questions that I may address to a particular panelist. Please feel free to comment, jump in, build off, however it flows. So I'm going to start with a question for Omar from the Cropper Foundation. Many people recognize the need for change in old systems that do not work. They want to be part of a new system, but don't know how. In what ways can people, especially young people, get involved in new and innovative systems of change?
Okay, yeah, so I think we all mentioned, climate change is a very complex and interconnected issue. So to deal with it, it is a it's a systemic issue. So, again, dealing with one part of climate change is not necessarily going to benefit everyone. So tackling symptoms is often not necessarily the best way to spend your energy. But the problem with that is that dealing with systems changes mean extremely difficult, because sometimes you don't even know where the beginning of a system might be. So what is sometimes useful, because it's very hard to trace back things. Sometimes it's maybe more useful to understand what are the goals of a system that you might be trying to change, because sometimes it's easier to identify those things. So let's say, for example, people say that climate change right now is, again, the outcome of years and years and years of human activity. You could say capitalism, you could say all these things as well, but really it's in the service of the economy, human development, and that sort of thing. So if you try to understand, like, what is the end goal of things like the economy? Is it to make a few people really rich? Is it really to reduce poverty and make sure that as many people as possible have good enough levels of well-being to live a happy and healthy and safe life? And even if you consider those two perspectives, you could see clearly that there's already like a disconnect between what the economy is set up for and what it's supposed to be meant to do. So sometimes understanding what the goals of a particular system are maybe helps you to understand what you can or can't engage with. So if dealing with climate change is complicated, but if you think, okay, the economy really is a driving force behind climate change, decarbonization or the lack thereof, or the dependence on foreign imports, all those sorts of things. So maybe your action is dealing with the end of that system, to be like, I want to advocate for an economy that is fair and just, and higher taxation for people above a certain income bracket, that sort of thing. Because again, when you try to deal with the system as a whole, it becomes, you can't. It's very complicated. It's difficult for a single person, even institutions. And I would say about understanding how, Gen Z, for example, which I assume a lot of CYEN might be in Gen Z, you all almost automatically are living with disruptive innovations every day. Just the being able to adopt the types of technology and platforms that are being put out on a regular basis, even that by itself is disruptive and innovative. And being able to, I think, just embrace what you all are comfortable using. Because again, the fact of the matter is that there's a certain generation that is sort of preaching into like the wind. if you try really hard to kind of change their mind. So if it's working for you on TikTok, then stick to that. I mean, the fact of the matter is that if you build leadership within your own community, if you build that sort of power and confidence, then who cares about engaging in other systems, to be very honest with you. Just push change from your own particular group or your particular platform that you're comfortable communicating on. Because the fact of the matter is that, you know, change also happens when enough people tend to have a similar thought about something. And it could be in a minority for now, but enough people have had that thought. So if it's too difficult to get involved, because I mean, I've done research myself on Gen Z protests and talking to people in Trinidad and Tobago who are in high school. And again, we have a culture of protesting is bad, he's a troublemaker. People won't give you time off of school to go and protest for climate. Your parents will say, oh God, they're gonna look bad if so-and-so see you in the road or marching for climate change. If it's a problem, stick to social media, generate, you know, conversation in your group, disrupt from there and outside. I mean, it's, you know, it's very difficult and it could be very frustrating. I know a lot of youth activists who in their early 20s had to go and seek professional help, had to deal with, you know, serious mental health issues because they just threw themselves in with sometimes unrealistic expectations, and sometimes it will really beat you down if you try to change the system. So just focus on what you're comfortable with in this short term. Try to make change from within your group, and hopefully that becomes more organic. I would say if you are interested in system change, spend the time to understand what that system really is. Don't just have knee-jerk reactions. Don't just read the headlines of an article. Try to understand something about this. The economy bothers me. Try and read up about it. Look at talks on YouTube. Understand what the system is saying to you, and therefore you know, hopefully have a better chance of understanding what you could do within it.
Thank you for that. And especially what you were saying, working with what you have within your own community. A lot of times, I think we have this very outward view of, I need to do this and that, I need to do what these people are doing, when we can really affect change where we are. Yeah.
Here's what they want to do. I mean, I, for one, very against wearing shirt and tie in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't care if people think it's the formal way to dress. We're living in a tropical country. So who cares? Do whatever makes you comfortable in the work that you want to do. That's very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any of the other panelists, if you'd like to jump in on this question, feel free.
I just wanted to add to what Omar was saying is that I just emphasize, change your space and then move from there, because we want to eat the whole cake one time. It's one bite at a time. So start with your one bite, which is your sphere, which is your area of influence, your family, your friends, your neighbors, and then you grow from there. When you are comfortable and you learn, you get more experience. But sometimes, as Omar was saying, we want to go and take the big fish, and then we get disillusioned when people don't accept our change. And from the flip side, people look at success stories. So if you can't change, for example, your sphere, your family, your friends, your neighbors, how do you expect to change in wider society? So that's the both sides of the coin. Work with where you're at. Build on your successes so you can learn, experience, see what worked within your micro environment, and then go from there. And like me, I have a pet peeve when stockings in the Caribbean. I don't advocate that. As I said, everybody has their way and I have mine. And that's my spare.
I gotta say, I agree with that stocking comment. I never understood it. Never. But thank you so much for your input. And I would just like to pivot off of that question this is just a general question, open to anyone. At times, a movement may not be aware of its power. In what ways can young people involved in the climate justice movement become aware of their power?
I would see it's similar to what was asked previously. You only know what your strengths are when you try something. If you never tried, you will never know you're capable of doing this. So my thing would be, once you have tried and you are successful, you grow on that. Added to that, sometimes success may be our greatest defeat because we are successful at something and we stay in that sphere of comfort. We don't try new things. So yes, you will try, you start off small, but try new things and do not fail, do not be angry if you fail. I told some young people on Sunday, I said, I want you all to fail at something. And they were like, Miss, why? Why you want us to fail? I said, because you learned from your failures. You learned how not to do that particular thing and try something new. So when you fail, you will also learn. And based on that, you can go forward. So once you try those things, then you will know how okay, I can't influence them by screaming on the place, throwing myself in the air, throwing my hands in the air and calling everybody and cussing everybody. No, that does not work. I tried it, that didn't work. So I will try this other method. So it's basically, and that's one of the things about life generally. How do you know your sphere of influence? By basically working in what you have, being comfortable in your skin and in your zone, but being able to step out ever so often into other areas that will challenge you to take you outside of yourself, outside of your comfort zone. And from there, you'll move on.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any panelists, if you'd like to comment, feel free.
Ditto.
So sorry,
No. I said ditto. I fully endorse that.
Yeah, and I was just going to excuse me, Daddy. Sorry, it was a very busy household this evening, apparently. So just to add to what Jillian was saying, I think, and we all were students once. And I think this, and Omar just talked about system change, right? And my pet peeve is the education system. Because when Jillian when she talked to them about failing, that system makes us believe that failing is wrong, that failing is bad, that we should never fail. I left the system thinking that. And when I became an entrepreneur, boy, oh boy, did I learn some lessons. And my coach, and I have a coach and a mentor now, so that was another thing that I wanted to add as well too. In recognizing what your own power is, you have to surround yourself with people who believe in you and who can support what you're trying to do. I'll use my own experiences. To this day, my father has come around to the good side, but my mother still doesn't understand what I do to this day. And I have to give her grace and allow her to support in the ways that she knows how to support, rather than getting upset as I used to because she not coming to my workshop or she not, you understand? And it's difficult. It's very, very difficult when you're trying to get those around you. Because I talked about talking to your family first. My family is like, what do you do, Shan? I've said it like 200 times and they still don't know. My children have a better idea. I can answer your question. Right? But, it is, I just wanted to reiterate and to add, surrounding yourself with people who support you, who believe in you, helps you to feel the power that you have within yourself to make the difference. Because you do. We don't need somebody else from somewhere else coming to tell us how we should deal with things, how we should react to things. Because as Omar was saying in the beginning, I thought that I needed to be somebody else. I thought, oh, well, environmental consultants behave a certain way, so I need to carry about myself in that way and wear stockings and all of the and all of the other things that I didn't necessarily like. But I felt that I had to do that because I thought I needed to fit in to some box that somebody created in order for me to get things done. And it's only when I recognized that I have to stand in my own power, in my own greatness, is when things started to happen. So I think for a lot of the times we try to, you look at Omar and say, well, okay, well, I want to be the next Omar. No, Bella, you don't need to be the next Omar. You need to be the next Bella. You need to be the next Sai. That's who you need to be. Yeah, because somebody asked me, Sean, how can I do what you do? I say, you don't need to do what I do. You need to do what you do. Right? So I just wanted to reiterate that, to fail forward, as I say. And my coach reminds me of that all the time. Fail forward. Learn. Denzel says, fall down 7 times, get up 8. He said that in a speech. So it's important, but surrounding yourself with people who support you helps you to recognize that you have the power within you to make a difference.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And a quote that I always remember is begin and begin again, because a lot of the times that's what it's all about. You have to begin and begin again, and that's how life goes. So thank you so much for that, Shan. And I have a question directed towards Miss Jillian, especially in light of the example that you gave with the students who unfortunately went to the beach cleanup and they themselves littered. How or what civic infrastructure is needed to achieve the head-to-heart transfer of knowledge that inspires activism? Meaning a lot of times we will get the knowledge, it's in our head, but how do you really transfer that to a space, in this case your heart, or a space that really inspires that sort of activism, that sort of moving beyond, just listening, but actually acting on what you have learned? And is this infrastructure currently in place or being implemented in the EMA?
First of all, thanks for the question. I had to think about that a lot. In the example I gave with the coastal cleanup, the issue was it was a bigger problem, not only about littering and understanding why they did it. In their mind, that was a whole societal issue of how you were trained, because they were trained, some of those children were trained that there's always somebody behind them to pick up behind them. So even though they saw they're going to clean up, in their mind, there's always somebody available to pick up after me. So how we bridge that gap of what your home training and your community training is as opposed to what the climate issue is. The head-to-heart transition. If you don't understand connection, you can't identify with it. So you will have many persons will see, as I gave the other example of doing the consultation with the government agencies. These are I tried corporations in Trinidad. So when I spoke to them, they understood the concept of climate change. But I was asking them, what are you doing in terms of climate change? And they didn't understand. They thought they were doing nothing. But when you had the conversation with them and you went into, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Oh, I said, just give me a list of things you do. And they went through a listing and they said, okay, we go out and we have flyers, we tell them about rainy season coming up and what we have to do, and the list went on. And I said, but you are doing climate change work. But in their mind, their work was, my boss, I had to do this as a task, and that was it. I have to give my workers tasks to do, and that was it. But they didn't understand that their work, their day-to-day work, was actually addressing climate resilience and climate mitigation measures in terms of public education, how to clean up the rivers, how to maintain the rivers and stuff like that. So the issue is our education, our outreach has to change, because it's not only the theory, because we're very good at science, and CYEN mentioned it in terms of our education system. We are good at giving you the theory. So once you could write the theory, sit down in an exam, you're good to go. but we're very low on practical day-to-day examples. How do I have a nexus between what I learn in the classroom and what I live out in life? How do I change behavior, which is the deeper question that we have here in terms of that question that was asked. And it's not something that happens overnight. It takes a lot of work, a lot of work. And people will only change when it impacts them personally. So our conversations now need to move from climate change is a thing and the whole theory, and say, how does it relate to me on a day-to-day basis? When I go to the community, the fisherman, when you go out to fish, how far you went out? You used to go out around the corner by the rock right there. Now you're going 5 miles out, 10 miles out. You know why you're doing that? Because you have less fish to catch. And then the conversation starts. And once they catch that thought, they're on fire. They understand what climate change is because it related directly to their finances and them personally. So that is how we have the nexus between the head and the heart. How does it impact us personally? And that is why climate justice is so important. So for us to use this vehicle, because it really speaks to meeting people where they are at and how climate is impacting them personally. I never sat down and thought about, yes, we have all these things about putting in the walkway for the persons with disability, but what happens in a flood in Port of Spain? Our person in a wheelchair will navigate Port of Spain. Have we sat down and thought about that? Yes, we say we have all these policies about disabilities and all these other things, but how do we integrate it, the paper, into the practical? And to me, that is how we have to think about it. So that's where our conversation and conversations like this force us, because this is a golden opportunity, just that small thing. How do we incorporate persons with disabilities into the climate debate? Something simple as that. I hope that helps.
Yes, very much so. Thank you, Ms. Jillian. If any of our panelists would you like to comment on that or anything to add? Go ahead, Sean.
I just wanted to add what Jillian was saying about, actually, I think you were saying it, January, but in my work in behavioral economics and behavioral psychology, one of the things that we recognize is that an increase in knowledge does not correlate to a change in behavior. So we talk about people who know more, but they don't necessarily do more because they know more, just by itself in isolation. In order to get them to do more, then there are other principles, what we call the principles of persuasion, in order to move them from simply knowing to doing. So one of the examples Jillian gave was, that person-to-person interaction. That's the technical term for us in this work. It's called social diffusion. Because Vianney Marie is doing it, and I like Vianney Marie, I will do it too. Because Omar is doing it, and I like Omar, or because Omar said, Shan, you have to, I will do it. And that is called social diffusion. And that's just one of the principles that we can use to really bring about the kind of behavior change that we want to see, basically. There are others, and I'll just mention a couple, that there's reciprocity. So Jillian, I asked Jillian, of course, Jillian, bake my cake this time, now, Gil, right? And she said, all right, Shan, no problem. And then Jillian comes, Shan, you know what? I need another $20 because I run out of gas. You could don't another 20. Because Jillian did something for me, I am willing to reciprocate. And that's one of the principles that we also use to kind of encourage behavior change as well too. And then I remember that she talks about that personal connection. I remember we were rehabilitating some landfills, well, some dump sites. There was one in particular in Saparia. And people were living on what was a dump site, like set up house, concrete structure, right? On what was a dump site. And one of the gentlemen who was living there he plants. He has a small vegetable garden. And he was saying, you know, miss, when I was planting, I was seeing this black liquid coming out of the ground, right? But I really didn't know what it was. What's that? I said, uncle, you know, that one local thing. I said, that is what you call lychee. He said, what's that? I said, so I described it in as, you know, simple terms as possible, you know, when rainwater mixes with waste and, you know, simple terms. He said, so miss, we got real people around here that's get sick. You feel it start making them sick? I said, yes, uncle, it's that. You know, so in continue what Julian was talking about the fishermen and having those kinds of conversations. It's only then when the light bulbs go off in their minds and they recognize, oh, what I am doing here is not the best thing for me to be doing. So, but if that man, and here is the censure, if that man is solely dependent on that kitchen garden for his livelihood, for his meals, he's not going to change it just like that. And us as experts, as environmentalists, as advocates, we also have to recognize that people depend on these things. So in order for them to stop what they're doing, we need to provide them with a viable alternative. Because as one economist told me, she said, Sean, if somebody have to depend on that one tree to take care of their family, to feed their families, I can't tell them cut it down because don't cut it down because it involves in climate change. The man depends on cutting down that tree for his livelihood. So we have to kind of reshape the conversations that we're having in order to bring about the change that we want to see. But there are ways of doing it. We just have to be not only willing, but have the ability to make the change.
Thank you so much for that, Shan. Next, I have a general question open to anyone. How can we centralize the voices that are most impacted by climate change? And I know earlier Ms. Julian had spoke about, especially those in rural communities. We often focus on the urban, but the rural are really even more impacted because of all the implications of climate change. So how do we centralize those voices?
Well, I guess I can go. So it depends on where you are. So like at Cropper Foundation, for example, we try our best to use our credibility to get into spaces where some of these other groups mightn't be able to get into. You know, your whole job as an NGO in particular is to put yourself out of a job, basically. And not depend on people staying poor and staying disenfranchised. So, I mean, your whole point of existing is to improve the well-being of these people. And so your job really is to, if you've done all this work to get access to the space, you know, it's your job to really get them in the room. If you can't get them into the room, talk to them to make sure that their thoughts are represented in whatever conversation you're able to have with the minister, whoever, or this particular committee or something. So, and that's not just in those policy discussions, but again, making sure that they're involved in everything. If you're doing stuff in a community, it's not just about having them there, it's making sure that this is their community. You know, if you have to cater food, like I said, cater from the community. If you have to rent chairs, rent from the community, so that everything that they do belongs to them. And because you're just visitors, even if it's in Trinidad and Tobago, you're a visitor in someone else's house. So their voice should really be what we need to listen to. So I think it's being very proactive in understanding who are you talking for, you know, whose voice should be there, who can't be there for whatever reason, and it's your obligation to try your best to get that into whatever room that you so centering is a very proactive thing. You have to be, because sometimes it's difficult. It's because you get accused of all that people want is just to protest or whatever. And let's be honest, I'm fully on board with people protesting. If that's the only way you could get stuff done, do it. You know, it's there for a reason. But again, you have to use your privilege to be able to say, yes, well, this is what they're going through. So we shouldn't just kick them to the side or whatever. So it's a proactive thing. It's something that you constantly have to think about, because it's so easy for us to say, oh yeah, go and buy 20 snack plates from wherever. You know, it's to think, okay, no, we're doing this in this community, let's do that. No, we're going to have this random meeting with some committee at the EMA. You know, it's work to say, okay, before I do that, let me talk to XYZ and hear what they have to say. So it's more work, but it's your job to do that kind of work.
I just wanted to add, one of the, I'm hoping that will come out of the ACE program would be that we will tap into the resources of people like Omar and the other NGOs that already has a relationship with the communities and can speak for their, can voice their issues. Because we at a level, we will not have the access that these like CYEN and Omar has, because they have already built relationship. They know the bread and butter issues of these communities and how to bring it across, that we need to address these issues. So it is important that when we gather in information, that is why I'm saying, when we gather information, how do we expand the work that they're doing into other areas? So that is the whole aim of ACE, bringing the information together and helping others that may not be aware to be able to have it done. So I just wanted to add that as part.
Thank you so much for that. And I see we have a question in the chat, although I'm not seeing that it was directed towards anyone in particular, so I guess it's a general question. How have you all tried to engage affected, vulnerable, marginalized communities in your projects on education and resilience building? Anyone? Come on.
I'll go and I'll give an example. So last year I concluded a project in the Guanapo community where we did some work with stakeholder engagement with regards to the landfill. And that community is, in my book at least, is considered a vulnerable community. And it required us to get really creative, but I will tell you this. I really learned, Omar and Julian just talked about, you have to understand where people are, right? And in doing that, now my organization wasn't the only organization involved in the project. So when I recognized that certain things were coming out, like for instance, they had an issue with online engagement. They were a community where you had to go door to door, talk to them, get them involved. And when I mentioned, you know, we have to allow them to use the things that they wanted to use, that information fell on their ears. I said, everybody has YouTube. We all just sit down and watch a little 2-minute, 5-minute, hour, sometimes video on YouTube. So a lot of them said, you know, miss, I had to wait for my children to come home to help me with the Zoom thing, you know. I don't know how to use Zoom, right? So it's something that they took for granted. So it really required Michaela to get very creative. As Omar just said it, sometimes it takes more work. But if you truly want to have the impact, it is worth doing the work. So it meant, okay, going into the community, meeting, for in my case, meeting the children, giving them storybooks, my book to read, you know, wanting to go back because I enjoyed it so much. I told them, I said, I'm going to come back and do something just with the children, right? So it means understanding where they are, because not all the time, especially if it's not a solo project where it's just me and the community, you're a part of a bigger thing, and you've gone and you've said, and this is back to the Amira's question about the disillusion. You know, you're talking things, you're giving things, you're telling, this is how it is, this is what we need to do. And somebody else will say, no, no, we want to do it like this, so we're going to do it like this. And then the day comes, you realize, like, hardly anybody turns up. And then you watch them like, you see what I told you? If you had only listened. But we have a lot of that that's still happening. But so for me and dealing with that community is really talking to them. They know what is best for them. It is not coming in there with your own solutions and saying, here, hold that. That's what's left for you. No, they will watch you and say, no, you have no idea what you're talking about. We have a very real example of the Caranage fishing facility. Nice, pretty, beautiful, doesn't get used. Because that's not what the fisher folk in Caranage wanted, right? They were consulted and then somebody went and did what they wanted to do and then come back to them and it was this big thing. It was all in the newspapers and on news and all of that. But that's a real example of what not listening does. So you have to really allow them listen carefully. Go beyond the quarreling because sometimes they go there and they vex with you and go beyond because of their previous experiences. Go beyond that. Listen to what the real issue is and then work with them to come up with the solution because they know what they want. So that is some of the strategies that we have to learn. As I said, in these things, you always learn lessons. And that's one of the lessons that came out is that they know what they want. You have to reach them where they are and allow them to be an integral part of coming up with the solution.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. And especially that very pertinent real life here in Trinidad example. And our other two panelists, if you'd like to contribute to this question, please go ahead. Okay.
I just wanted to emphasize the listening to the community part. They know what they want. You want them to have a big complex and they want a shed. Don't give them the complex, give them the shed. Because that's what they ask for. Because the shed, the complex will not suit their needs. Always listen to them. We have this famous story in Tobago. They came and they built a bridge. The committee told them, don't build a bridge like this. It will flood out. I'm the engineer. What do you know? People live in the community, they know there is flood. The bridge was built and the bridge was washed away because you didn't listen to the community. So always listen to what they tell you. They might not tell you in the scientific terms, but as Cyan said, get beyond the dialect and the green verb and the my cousin say and my auntie say, and listen to what they ask is they talking to you about. And that is a disconnect a lot of us scientific educated people have. We don't know how to, I don't want to use the word dumb down because I think that is wrong. They don't know how to simplify our language to suit the communities we go to. Always be able, and that's a skill that you have to learn. Learn how to modify your language for your audience because you will lose people just by how you say something. And the
don't speak, Julian, I was just gonna say, don't speak the Queen's English and have them watch you as like deer in headlights. Like what?
Yes.
Even
they don't have a
simple as that. Even, because I've had that experience. Watch me like, what's she, miss, what? If you have to use the local dialect, use without the green birds and yellow adjectives, but use the local dialect, meet them where they are, don't come with the Queen's English, and then they watch, they're like, I don't know what that lady just said,
And they watch you with suspicion.
Yes, like, what you come here to do? You come to take things.
Yes. Get
so
information to get a degree.
Exactly. All of that is real. What Julian and I are sharing here is real experiences that we have had with working with different communities and getting them to come on board with what we're saying. In the climate change discussion, it's about destigmatization. It's about using, bringing the language in an easy to understand and digestible format. It is about taking the theoretical big things that floating in the sky that we know and bringing it to the people in a way that they can understand. Take ourselves out of the equation for a little bit and bring it to them in a way that they understand.
But let me just also add one thing. Don't think that you know everything. I have this practical example. I think it was IFPAM, and part of the program was doing a map of Tobago and identifying a certain point. And this fisherman from Speyside, he said, your map is wrong. He looked at the map. He looked where he put some of it. He said, your map is wrong. And some of the people were like, we sent us this map. These people have the geological data and they know the structure and the geography of Tobago and they know these things. And the man said, your map wrong. When I fishing, that is not the point of the sea when I go outside there. You know, after 3 days, they came back and they realized that they had the map wrong. So don't think that because you have your degree and he's a fisherman that he don't know Tobago or he doesn't know his area. Or when you go in a community, you know everything. You don't. You know the theory. Sometimes the word on the ground is different. So never go assuming you know everything. Always go with an open mind. And if you can learn something better, if you can teach something, great. But it's an exchange. That's the important thing.
I think that is a great note for us to end on. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Jillian, because a lot of times, especially with power dynamics that can exist, when we have, we think, oh, this person is so educated, so much better than me. And that initial bias that always happens, it always occurs, to move past that and to really treat each other as equals in any community, in any, whether it be rural, urban, anyone, as an equal partner with valuable contribution. So thank you very much for that, Ms. Jillian, and thank you to all our panelists for joining us this evening for this very important discussion. We are continuing tomorrow with our last 2 pillars of climate justice. So I really hope that we will have our audience again tomorrow to complete our 6 pillars of climate justice. Again, thank you so much, all our panelists, and do have a great night.
It was a pleasure.
Hi, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.